Solar flares are one of those things that you have to take a calculated risk on because they will zap you with radiation once they get to you, but you've got a long time, hours if not a day or more, to either come back to Earth, find a shielded place, or prepare yourself.
Astronauts could only rely on their spaceship to survive a solar flare.
And I had plans for this. The plan was to turn the bulky end of the ship toward the incoming front of radiation. That bulk of the ship and all the fuel in it would provide plenty of protection for that burst of radiation.
I fail to see the brilliance of such a plan, considering that the solar radiation, as pointed out by Parker and NASA, travels to near light speed. And in the case of cosmic radiation, according to Malden, it comes from all sides. Even the propagandists can't decide on how the solar flares were avoided. Robert Brannig tells us, if NASA found an unacceptably high probability for a solar event during a scheduled flight, the mission would have been postponed. And yet Plate says, in a sense, the astronauts are indeed risking their lives to go to the moon because solar flares are not predictable. Definitely the only element of truth, if any, to ever come out of Plate's book. Going with the information that Malden and Van Allen had fed them, Kaysing and Renee asked Lovell how much radiation he got from his 2 flights to the moon. Unable to provide an answer for his Apollo 8 mission, Lovell claimed he had only received 410 millirad aboard Apollo 13. This is almost only half of 1 ram. Jim Lovell no doubt feared he was not going to win this suit.
At the last minute, he ran in with his high-powered attorney and asked for a summary judgment by the judge to kick the case out of court.
Yeah.
And we had to show cause why not. So I immediately jumped on it, and I sent Billy 1 page proving that the judge could not give him this because they had perjured themselves on the things. Because one of the questions I had Billy ask this clown is, did he know of a Ralph Renee? Oh, no. Okay, but I got his goddamn personal letter signed by him.
If you remember previously, Jim Lovell had sent an angry letter to both Bill Kaysing and Ralph Renee. Lovell had made himself guilty of perjury when he denied knowing Renee during these interrogations.
The judge cannot give away, if somebody lies, is perjured, he can't put that trial to the side. So I prepared this paper with only about, half a page less. Short, sweet, to the point in a couple of places. And Billy's supposed to hand this in, but instead, Billy never hands him my paper. He hands him 20 pages of bullshit about how he wrote this, about how he wrote that, about his wife had died, he went off the deep end on me.
Reading through this 20-page document, it has become clear that Kaysing was determined to clear his name. And who could blame him? Speaking from personal experience, the propagandists routinely try to poison my reputation over the internet, all because I stood up for Bill Kaysing when they chose to dance on his grave. I have many friends who do not doubt Apollo, and yet they all agree that there is a huge difference between believing in the moon landings and endorsing the smear campaigns promoted by Jay Windley, Phil Plait, Robert Brannig, Svector, Jim Ohlberg, and many others. Although Kaysing did not give the Judge Renee's papers, there is one relevant passage that deserves mentioning. Was the defendant's defamatory statement opinion? Absolutely not. He made a clear declaration in both the Metro and his letter to me, Jefferson Davis, and Ralph Renee that I was wacky. I guess the judge must have missed that little detail.
And it got thrown out of court. And Bill didn't even bother to hand him what I sent him, which would have prevented it. You can't do it. You can't grant a summary to somebody who's committed perjury. So basically, there went that case. So after that, he became Liar Lovell. Every time I use his name in a book, it's Liar Lovell.
I honestly can't say that I disagree with Ralph on that. In fact, the liar title he invented is one I do not mind attributing to many propagandists. Liar Windley, Liar Plate, and of course, Liar Vector. In spite of my doubts in the moon missions, Never before have I called an Apollo astronaut a liar. In fact, I will go on the record to say that some were true heroes. Neil Armstrong and David Scott became heroes aboard Gemini 8 when they set America the milestone of the first docking in space. They subsequently were seconds away from dying when a jammed thruster sent their docked craft spinning, eventually reaching 1 revolution per second. Out of all the 24 men who falsely claim to have gone to the moon, there are really only 2 of them that are worthy of being called liars. Jim Lovell is among those 2 because he faked 2 flights to the moon and went on to lie to Bill Kaysing and lied before a court. The other liar is his co-pilot from Gemini 7 and Apollo 8, Frank Borman. As part of the next 9, during the 50s, Borman had worked at West Point as an assistant professor of thermodynamics. After being selected to lead NASA's investigation into the Apollo 1 fire, Borman had this to say before Congress.
I don't believe that any of us recognized that the test conditions for this test were hazardous. I myself and Gemini 7 flew for 2 weeks in a 100% O2 environment. We tested on the ground with 14.7 pounds per square inch absolute O2. We purged with 20.7 pounds per square inch absolute O2. In no way did I consider the test conditions hazardous.
And yet, in the same testimony,
we are very aware of the fires that occurred at Johnson Naval Air Station and also at Brooks Air Force Base.
How anyone could know about these oxygen fires and then come back and say they thought the Apollo 1 test conditions were not hazardous is beyond comprehension.
Once you get something burning in oxygen, everything will burn, including steel, including asbestos. They did 4 tests, NASA, before they got into this shit. And each test turned into a disaster. In one of the tests, a guy was changing a damn light bulb. And this is at only 5 pounds pressure, right? Mm-hmm. Pure oxygen atmosphere, 5 pounds. Somehow the bulb broke, the spark happened, nobody knows. His arm, not his clothes, his arm caught on fire. Some guy comes racing over with an asbestos blanket, wraps the arm in it, and the asbestos blanket went on fire. And you can't tell me that he didn't know the dangers of pressurized oxygen. Because he's a thermodynamic expert. Welders know it, doctors know it, patients in the hospital know it. But they didn't know it. Oh my goodness, we didn't know that.
And what say the propagandists of these lies that Borman and Lovell have told us? The known dangers of the Apollo 1 fire that NASA swept under the rug. The denials that Jim Lovell told the judge. And who could forget the CIA's 1962 proposal to blame Fidel Castro should John Glenn die aboard Friendship 7 and use his death to justify a US-led invasion into Cuba. On his website, Robert Brainig sums up both the murder charges and the lawsuit with the following.
There's not much I can say here, other than the accusation is a complete fabrication with no corroborating evidence whatsoever. Some hoax advocates claim there have been many suspicious deaths among those associated with the Apollo program, alleging that NASA murdered these people. These accusations are both ludicrous and libelous. Bill Kaysing particularly has made many slanderous allegations against NASA. Yet, when former astronaut Jim Lovell called him wacky, Kaysing had the goal to file suit against Lovell. Wisely, the suit was dismissed.
And on Phil Plate's website,
Kaysing says that the Apollo 1 fire that killed Roger Chaffee, Ed White and Gus Grissom was no accident. Grissom was ready to talk to the press about the moon hoax, so NASA killed him. Kaysing says NASA also killed other people who were about to blow the whistle as well. This is so disgusting. I have a hard time writing a coherent reply. Kaysing has no grasp of basic physics, photography, or even common sense. But he accuses NASA of killing people to shut them up. This is a pretty loathsome accusation. I'll end this on one more bit the HBs don't talk about. When Jim Lovell, two-time Apollo astronaut and commander of the ill-fated Apollo 13 mission, was told about Kaysing's claims, Lovell called him a kook. Kaysing, ever the rational thinker, sued Lovell for slander. Imagine Kaysing, who says that NASA murdered 3 men outright and arranged for the murders of others, sued Commander James Lovell for slander. After some time, a judge wisely threw the case out of court. There's still hope.
Jay Windley dodges both the lawsuits and the murders right at the beginning of his page devoted to attacking Bill Kaysing.